The fourth Blood Angel character has joined Tacticus, as Nicodemus, the sanguinary priest, becomes the 85th character overall to join the game. Today we'll look at whether he's a conqueror of the people or a healer of a man. The fourth Blood Angel character has arrived in Tacticus as Nicodemus joins the faction, and surprisingly we have another Imperial healer joining the game. Sanguinary priests are both medics and mystics, and it is their duty to guide Blood Angels through the worst excesses of the Red Thirst. That's one of the genetic flaws of the Blood Angels Space Marine chapter, which gives them a vampiric craving for blood. The sanguinary priests actually call upon the Blood Angels to embrace the Red Thirst and unleash its strength when the day is darkest and the battle is going against them. And so Saint Nick comes at us through this festive period dressed in white and red and only missing a beard and some reindeer to finish his outfit. But let's see how good he is in Tacticus. As always in this series, we're going to take a look at three different things: how long it roughly takes to level him up to Diamond 3 when compared to other characters, his traits and general usefulness, how good he is in legendary events, and I won't be looking too much into his usefulness in guild raids or tournaments, as I leave that to our other wonderful content creators. So let's dive right in. Nicodemus is unlocked in the usual character release event. This one, the Insanguination event, starts on December the 22nd, and so you will be able to get them very soon. It sees you collecting red thirst points by completing missions, which are then converted into sanguine blood drops, and these allow you to open sanguine chests, which have the path of insanguination shards and other goodies within them. These shards can be used to unlock and level up Nicodemus, and you can see the missions on screen now. If you need help with these missions and getting the best possible start, then definitely check out my beginner's guide to character events, which is linked in the description below. Basically, if you play through the tournament arena and spend 110 blackstone per day, we will definitely be able to pick up each character at Epic 1 level without the need to purchase any additional packs. And in the meantime, if you want to earn some free blackstone to help you on your way, you can use my Referral Code in-game today to get 100 free blackstone. Just note, you can only use one Referral Code, so make sure you make the most of it. And let's start by looking at roughly how long it takes them to level from Stone 1 to Diamond 3. The reason I say roughly is because my sheets don't take into account all the extra ways you can get free energy, like in the tournament arena, nor getting items gifted from your guildmates or from the daily shop. It also doesn't take into account any hard to get items that haven't been added in lots of places yet, but even with all that in mind, it's always interesting to see how they compare to the other characters. So what about Nicodemus? Where does he fit in? Well, it's really interesting because he is the easiest to level currently in the game. And as we've seen recently, things have been getting a little more difficult, but the Blood Angels definitely are the easiest faction to level. Nicodemus himself comes in 85th position, taking 35 days to level. If we look at the graph, we can see them over there on the right hand side. It takes Nicodemus 3 days to get from Stone 1 to Bronze 1, another 2 days from Bronze 1 to Silver 1, 5 days to Gold 1, 11 days to Diamond 1, and then 14 days to Diamond 3, which of course adds back up to the total 35 days. So the important thing here is that for new players, this is definitely someone that's worth picking up because he's a healer and they are the most important character archetypes in the game currently. Now let's take a look at his traits. Nicodemus is an Imperial character and they have a chain 3 melee attack, which has a 20% pierce ratio and no ranged attack. He has the healer trait, and he has the rapid assault trait, which gives him +1 movement until he makes an attack, and his first attack will deal plus 25% damage. Now let's take a look at the character's damage, range damage, and defense. We do this by leveling the character up to Winged Diamond 3 with level 30 skills and no weapons or equipment. Then Castellan Creed, the character with the most average armor and traits in the game, becomes a punching bag for them to test their damage. And finally, Creed will punch them back to see their defensive skills. This is all then ranked against everyone else in the game. So let's see how they do today. Creed, are you ready for today's test?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, Nicodemus. You're looking rather fetching today.
Do you know Nicodemus already, Creed?
Sure, Nicodemus might be a sanguinary priest, but with the amount of blood he leaves around the field, he's more like the grimdark Grinch.
And so Nicodemus has no ranged attack, and he does 1,852 melee attack damage, and he takes 2,868 damage from Creed. So with those scores, Nicodemus places it 67th on the damage chart, which is quite low, so as a healer, he doesn't really do a great deal with only Isabella and Actus being lower than him. That 20% pierce ratio from a chain weapon just doesn't really cut it. In terms of defense, he's in 34th place, and he takes the same damage as Titus, so it's definitely not terrible, but obviously not someone you want in the front lines. In fact, as a healer, I don't think you ever want them on the front lines, and if they're the last man standing, then the battle is probably already lost, so it doesn't really matter where they place on this chart in my opinion. Moving to his skills, his passive is Sanguinary Priest, which is in the healing category of skills. This is a very nice passive heal, as it'll heal all adjacent units to Nicodemus after he moves, or at the end of the turn if he doesn't move. It's a pretty straightforward skill, and it does mean that he'll be able to do a bit of battle ball healing action, similar to what Isabella does, although he is nowhere near the level of Isabella. I would say that he's a budget Isabella in that regard. Should this be prioritized as a skill over others? As a healing skill, for new players, I definitely would be leveling this up. His active is Blood Chalice, and this also falls into the damage category of skills. All adjacent non-mechanical units are set to 50% health, and then until the start of their next turn, they gain a higher pierce ratio with melee attacks. They will also be healed if they manage to perform a melee attack. So this is a pretty high risk, high reward skill. It'll definitely be interesting for someone like Ragnar, Karn, Brother Jaegar or Macer, who are looking to maximize melee damage in the biggest way possible, and especially for the multi-hit team, it might be interesting with Ragnar specifically. Should this be prioritized as a skill over others for new players? I wouldn't unless you're building him up specifically for this skill. So what do I think about these traits and skills? Well, this one's really a tough one for me. I think he's the best new player healer as he's quickest to level and will be available for everyone from the Insanguination event. He is able to fit into a battle ball in place of Isabella, and that active will mean that he definitely shows up in some teams that are trying to maximize damage for a round. The other thing is that I have to say I've underestimated the Blood Angels as individual team members so far, and I don't want to fall into that trap again. I think the nuance of the faction has definitely come later as we've sat and played around with him. And so I'll pick him up hesitantly and at least give him a try, but right now, because I have so many other healers and boosting characters, he just isn't a priority for me as a mid-level player. For newer players, I think you should prioritize getting him for all the reasons we've talked about so far. In terms of modes, he doesn't have the greatest set of traits or damage. He will fit into melee battles with a lot of other characters, and he has 3 hits, which means he isn't fitting into either end of the scale in terms of minimum hit battles or maximum hit battles. But he can do a bit of a battle ball, and he's a healer, which is always useful. So we'll see shortly which battles he can do in the current events. For guild raids, it's mostly about DPS and boosting, and like I said, he can fit into a multi-hit team, giving Ragnar even more damage in his first attack. He just won't do much after that, and so I think I would rather be taking someone that is more useful throughout the fight. However, it's still going to be fun to see who can hit a world record damage with him. For Tournament Arena, again, it could be fun to have someone that does tons of damage in the first attack, but he isn't going to do much damage after that, and healers are usually picked on and destroyed in tournament arenas, so outside of faction wars, I don't expect him to get much play. And for guild wars, I think any healer is interesting and annoying enough to be put into places, so it's a maybe on this one. And so who does he work well with? Well, I've talked a lot about Ragnar already, and so that's one team that's super interesting to stick Nicodemus into. He basically doubles Ragnar's damage output, and so that's a serious amount of boosting, and it means that he really does need to be taken very seriously as a piece of that puzzle. The other one, of course, is with the Blood Angels, and I know it must be getting a bit boring listening to me recently and just saying, he's the best for his own faction, but there really has been an interesting shift from the developer Snowprint in pushing new factions as cohesive units. There's a lot of synergy there, and for these Blood Angels, they're definitely starting to get very interesting. Metanio is one of the key members of teams in the lower brackets at Tournament Arena. Mephiston is super important in guild wars and salvage runs, and Lucian is even starting to be seen in some guild raid teams. So lots of possibilities there, and let's see if Nicodemus starts to fit into places as well. And so overall, this is another great release, and someone that will definitely see play in some events. If you're a new player, do try and pick him up. Moving on to the legendary events, let's take a look and see where he fits in. Starting with the Karn event, he doesn't appear in the alpha track because Imperials are not allowed to be used there. In the beta track, he appears in the minimum 3 hits, no Terminator armor, and no big target battles. In the gamma track, he appears in the no mechanical and no flying battles, and so he ends up on 185 points, so not the best start. Moving to the Mephiston event, he isn't used in the Alpha track again because it's no Imperials. In the Beta track, he's used in the no big target and minimum 3 hits battles, and in the Gamma track, he's used in the no mechanical and minimum 3 hits battles, and this gives him another poor score of 205 points. Moving to the Pattermine event, in the Alpha track, he appears in the melee and max 4 hits battles. In the Beta track, he doesn't appear because it's no Imperials, and in the Gamma track, he appears in the no Overwatch and no Final Vengeance battles, which gives him another terrible score of 165. And so not only does he score incredibly poorly, but each of the battles that he can participate in is already filled with lots of other characters. So he isn't even appearing in battles where there's only a few characters to pick from, and that means you probably have characters already to fit into those battles. So he's definitely not the best in legendary events. And we can see that in the top scoring champions from legendary events. He actually appears down in 78th position, so he's in amongst a bunch of psychers and people that just don't score many points. So really poor showing from him in legendary events, and that means he's not going to appear too often. And just before we go, a small reminder that my automated deathmatch tournament will be happening soon. 160 players have picked their alliances, and Castell and Creed, myself, and maybe some special guests will be commentating on the matches. The matches themselves are automated, no one is playing them directly, but it's still fun to see who wins and to see the prizes they get. You can see the draw for the matches on Friday the 20th of December, the first rounds on Sunday the 22nd, the last 16 on Friday the 27th, and the finals are on Sunday the 29th. So during this festive period, when you've got nothing else to do, make sure you tune in and see the event. And so what do you think of Nicodemus? Is Saint Nick going to be slipping down your chimney, chalice in hand, and dodging the garlic? Or will he be joining your other ignored collection of Imperials sitting at Stone 1? You can check him out right now in the latest version of the Google Planner Sheets linked below.